A 9-year-old boy, Alfie Steele, who was beaten and tortured to death by his own mother and her fiancé, was constantly hungry at school, a court has heard. Alfie Steele died in February 2021 from more than 50 different injuries after his lifeless body was found in the bath. His scumbag, banshee, evil, psychotic mother, Carla Scott, 35 years of age, and her equally, if not more so, scumbag boyfriend, partner, fiancé, Dirk Howell, 41 years of age, both are accused of subjecting Alfie Steele, the 9-year-old boy, to a campaign of sinister abuse. Their murder trial at Coventry Crown Court, England, was told that teachers were worried about Alfie in the months before his death. A social worker from Worcestershire Children's Services said that she advised the mother to give Alfie a bigger breakfast. So the social worker identified to some extent that Alfie Steele wasn't eating enough, that he was constantly hungry. Perhaps he appeared malnourished, perhaps he appeared limp, like low energy. But either way, a social worker did identify a problem. So this article here is largely discussing some of the witness testimony from a specific social worker from Worcestershire Children's Services. There is an ongoing trial. It's believed to be likely to go on for around 8 weeks, I think I read, from one of the commentators, so thank you. This article is giving a little bit of information from the social worker witness that was involved in the case of Alfie Steele, and I'll read through the majority of that. You'll be able to read through it yourself, and I feel that I will try, can't guarantee, but I will try to make further videos should further articles come out in regards to the case. So maybe not every last detail I'll cover, but as important information comes out, perhaps I'll cover that in video form. But back to this article. The social worker told the court that during a visit in November 2019, the boyfriend, Dirk Howell, was at the home and the social worker wanted him to take part in a risk assessment. So he lived at the home with the mother, Carla Scott, and the victim, 9-year-old Alfie Steele. So the social worker rightly wanted the boyfriend, the fiancé, Dirk Howell, to be a part of the risk assessment. Seems reasonable to me, seems like the right decision to me. So the mother went to get her boyfriend. Hi boyfriend, social workers here. They'd like to talk to you as part of a risk assessment in relation to my son, Alfie Steele. What did the boyfriend say in return to that? I don't want to speak to an effing social worker. It's got nothing to do with me. What's it got to do with me? Basically what he said. The social worker overheard an argument or a discussion between the mother and the evil fiancé, and the evil fiancé said to the mother, hey, if you had to choose between your 9-year-old son, Alfie Steele, or me, who would you choose? And the mother responded how any mother ought to respond by saying, I would choose my son over you. At which point, the emotionally immature, in my opinion, psychotic boyfriend fiancé, Dirk Howell, said, well, that's it. The relationship between us is over. If you've got the nerve to choose your son over me, well then, what's the point? I don't know how important that bit of information is to know about that reaction from the boyfriend, from the fiancé, to get angry to the point of declaring an end to the relationship with the mother, because the mother, in a hypothetical situation, would choose to support and care for her son over the fiancé. I don't know how important that information is. It's just a passing conversation argument, but I don't know, perhaps it is highly relevant. Perhaps it is very indicative of the mental state of Dirk Howell, the boyfriend, the fiancé. To me, it indicates an absurd level of, I don't know what, I don't know. I mean, I'll say emotional immaturity, a lack of understanding that a mother's always going to care for their child, or rather, a mother ought to always prioritize the love of their child. They ought to act like a mother bear to protect their children. And the boyfriend didn't seem to be able to mentally grasp that very, very basic, very, very natural concept. So I don't know what that does indicate. A certain level of psychopathy, perhaps? I don't know. But I suspect it might. The social worker said that in March 2020, there were legal discussions within, if I understand correctly, within the Worcestershire Children's Services organisation. There were legal discussions as to whether or not Alfie Steele should be removed from the care of his mother and the mother's boyfriend. Ultimately, no such action took place. So the Children's Services did realise, did have some understanding, I presume some level of evidence, of mistreatment of Alfie Steele, lack of care in one capacity or another. I don't know if the Children's Services were aware of any injuries sustained by Alfie Steele. We're not told that they were. I'm guessing they weren't. We're not told that the Children's Services were aware of any physical ailments, diseases or such that Alfie was suffering due to some level of negligence or mistreatment. I presume there was no such evidence, although we are told that Alfie suffered bad asthma. So I am wondering whether or not it's reasonable to be angered by the Children's Service's lack of action. So they did consider removing Alfie Steele. They chose not to pursue down what I would imagine would be a fraught, difficult legal path to go down. So I would imagine that it's perfectly fair and reasonable for Children's Services to have a level of hesitancy. I don't think it would be ideal for Children's Services to make overly rash decisions in removing children from their parent. There has to be a certain protocol, a certain process to go through, a certain level of consideration, a certain amount of evidence to judge before making such decisions. I would think that's fair and reasonable, but their hesitancy in this case did cost the life of Alfie Steele. If they had have removed him from the care of his mother and the mother's boyfriend, no doubt Alfie Steele would still be alive. So there was an error made. As such, I would think myself, my opinion, that some level of investigation in regards to the processes, standards of the Children's Services would be called for, an investigation. However, I wouldn't necessarily throw the Children's Services under the bus in this case. If they didn't have an overwhelming amount of evidence or an adequate amount of evidence that Alfie Steele was a victim, that he was being tortured, that he was malnourished, then if they didn't have that evidence, then perhaps it's unreasonable to expect them to have acted. Of course, if they had have acted, they would have done the right thing, but I'm guessing that they didn't have the required amount, the required quality of information, evidence to be able to make that decision. Back to the article, the jury heard that in the first COVID lockdown in England, children on safeguarding plans were allowed to go to school, but Alfie did not attend. So there was a lockdown in England. I don't know the exact dates of this, but I think it was around the April time in 2020. Alfie didn't attend, and the reason why Alfie wasn't sent to school at that time was due to his bad asthma, or certainly that's the reason presented by the mother. The mother said that they didn't want to push Alfie to go to school because of his bad asthma. Now that could have been a legitimate reason, perhaps. If he has trouble breathing, it would be fair and reasonable for a parent not to want to push him to go to school and be at risk of contracting what at that point in time we all thought was an extremely dangerous disease, COVID-19. You wouldn't want to push your child to be at risk of contracting that disease. So that could be a genuine reason, or it could be an excuse. The court heard that the next door neighbor to Alfie's family heard a child whimpering on April the 4th, 2020. The neighbor told the jury that he called emergency services at 5:31 a.m. after hearing banging and crashing coming from the property. In the emergency services call, he said it sounded like a child in distress, a child whimpering, pleading almost. The witness also said that he heard shouting from a male voice coming from inside the home. A police officer went out to the property to follow up on the call, and the police officer said that the mother answered the door but was confused why the police were there. The officer checked and saw Alfie sleeping in his bed. So I'm going to comment on that. I'm going to say well done to the neighbor for calling the police. I've done that myself. I've heard from a neighbor's apartment a couple of children in distress. I would say in distress. It sounded like, I mean, and you know, you hear things and your brain forms possibilities, images. How accurate they are, I don't know, but it sounded like they were being punished. Certainly, undoubtedly, the children were being punished in a very upsetting way. It sounded like they were being beaten, would be my guess. And I didn't like the sound of it, and I called the police, spoke with the police officers, explained what I heard, and I don't know if they did anything. My guess is they didn't take it seriously. Oh, okay, well that sounds like a parent disciplining their child, you know, that's what parents do, don't worry about it. And I imagine that there's some level of rationality there, there's some level of reasonableness there. We can't always jump the gun, as it were. But regardless of that, I applaud the witness. The witness was concerned. They did the right thing. The officer did the right thing by going to the home. They checked. Alfie was asleep in his bed. The mother, of course, said, oh, no, there's no problems here, officer. So it looks like everyone followed protocol. The police followed protocol. The neighbors followed protocol. Children's Services followed protocol. But there wasn't any actual action taken. Going back to the article, the mother's boyfriend, fiancé Dirk Howell from Birmingham, England, has previously admitted child cruelty against other children, but he denies murder, manslaughter, cruelty, or causing or allowing the death of Alfie. The mother also denies murder murder, manslaughter, causing or allowing the death of Alfie, and child cruelty offences against Alfie and other children. The trial continues. So as I say, a commentator did ask me to follow up on this case. Another commentator let me know that the trial is ongoing, is expected to go on for around 8 weeks. So this article and this video is really about the testimony provided from one social worker in particular, and it gives us a little bit of an insight, some interesting aspects. I mean, my takeaway from it is that I think I'm repeating myself. I think I have repeated myself multiple times during this video. Apologies. But I do feel that systems were in place, protocols were in place. You've got the police, you've got the children's services, you've got neighbors, and everyone's doing the right things. Everyone's attending, they're looking, they're showing concern, they're taking some base level of action. But unfortunately, everyone's been, I'm going to use the word neutered, not the right word, I'm sure. They are not taking effective action. I would in no way blame the neighbor. The neighbor did everything they could do. They're not in a position to intervene any further than they did. They contacted the police, and the police took some level of action. They attended the scene. The neighbor is not to blame in any way, shape or form. I feel that the social workers did the right thing in monitoring Alfie Steele, in discussing whether or not he ought to be removed from the family home, but they failed to actually go ahead and take effective action being removing him from the home. Of course, that's an unintentional failure, and the question would be, could that have been avoidable or reasonably avoidable? I mean, if child services were to automatically remove children from every situation where they are concerned or where there are complaints, then I could imagine that doing more harm than good. So they do have a decision-making process to go through. There are legalities that they have to adhere to. They have to be practical, and it's much the same with the police. The police attended the scene. They spoke with the mother. Perhaps they spoke with the mother's boyfriend. They checked up on the boy. So they went in to the home. They looked inside Alfie Steele's bedroom. They saw him sleeping. So really, what more could they have done? I mean, my feeling is, based on the information that we're being presented here, unfortunately, the authorities didn't have enough information, and perhaps they didn't have enough just cause to justify more invasive investigation. I don't know. Don't know what the answer is. I mean, one suggestion I could have, however reasonable this may be or not, is perhaps the social workers could insist on a doctor doing a physical checkup on the child concerned, a thorough physical. Maybe that could be the solution. If Alfie Steele was sent to a doctor and he had to attend a thorough doctor medical examination within a certain period of time, within 48 hours or something along those lines, perhaps the doctor or the medical examiner was, let's say doctor, I think a medical examiner or somebody is a different role, but let's say a doctor attends the home, performs a thorough medical exam on the child concerned, that would it not identify any injuries, any level of malnutrition, mistreatment, etc. So maybe that's the solution. Enabling social workers, children's services workers to be able to mandate thorough, somewhat immediate medical examinations by a doctor of the children concerned, and judgments can be made based on the results of such an examination. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm going to wrap things up at this point. I've kind of dropped off a little bit of making videos as regularly or as many as I would like. I need to pick that up. I get a little bit overwhelmed for a couple of different reasons, a few different reasons. The topics are very dark. They do affect me. Sometimes I just can't face them. The case of Alfie Steele I covered at the time of his death, and it is a touching case, particularly his image. When I see the photo of Alfie, and I've only been able to find the one photo of Alfie, he just looks very much like me, very much like my friends back then, at that age, maybe even a little bit older. He's just like a normal schoolboy, you know. I don't know, I can just identify with him a little bit too much. He's just a little bit too reminiscent of myself and my friends at that age, and I don't know, it's a bit touching because of that, a bit more touching because of that. So I'm going to wrap things up at this point. If you appreciate the coverage, please do like, comment, subscribe, share the video as you see fit. I do have a memberships that you're able to join. I don't have any members. Getting a couple of members would be a lot of encouragement, so that would be great. If you agree, disagree with any of the comments that I've made, please just drop a note, and of course, take care.